Hello and welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie, and today I'm delighted to be joined by four of the brightest minds in conversational AI to discuss the latest news from across the space. Yesterday, I'm delighted to be joined by Dan Miller, lead analyst and founder of Opus Research, Tom Hebner, VP of Transformation Services at Neuroflash, James Poulter, CEO of Vixen Labs, and last but certainly not least, Bradley Metrock, CEO of Project Voice. It's great to have all four of you join me today, and let's get straight into the news. So I think the story that's kind of on everybody's mind right now, and the one that I think will be great for us to discuss first, is the Godfather, the so-called Godfather of AI, coming out and suggesting that we should all stop our AI development right now. I don't know, Dan, I'll probably come to you on this. What are your thoughts on this story?
The name's Jeffrey Hinton, for those who are keeping a scorepad of all the people that have signed petitions or done whatever to put a halt to all this. But I mean, in all seriousness, this is a person, well, it reminds you of a few things. Even though, ChatGPT changed the world a few months ago, and everybody thinks generative AI is this phenomenon that, it has been put in the hands of the common person. Within the past, there's hundreds of millions of people playing around with ChatGPT, Bard, a bunch of the generative AIs, and that's been a very distinctive thing. But Jeffrey Hinton is not alone among people that have been playing around with, starting with deep neural networks back, decades ago, who have been monitoring or thinking how it might fork at some point and just be dominated by people who are skilled in using them and don't have the best intentions in mind. So it manifests in a few ways. What specifically happened is Jeffrey Hinton, who was long time running things over at Google, having come from Carnegie Mellon and before that MIT and then the University of Edinburgh, but definitely working with the greatest minds in academia who define what artificial intelligence is saying, by example, leaving one of the companies that one of the five hyperscalers that are going to give shape to large language models, to generative resources and that sort of things, just sort of saying, hey, we need to look hard at how this resource is released on the world and spark a debate and a discussion, just like we're going to have right here, about what guardrails ought to be put on it, about people understanding what it is, and how information is all digital information is compiled, what biases might emerge as you assign patterns to or build more models from it, and then just what limits should be put on the output of queries to these models. And it's not a bad thing. There's just a little naivete involved, and I'm not claiming that he's naive or others that have objected. I'm just saying the genie is out of the bottle. I heard somebody ask ChatGPT to come up with a unique way of saying the genie is out of the bottle, and it came out with the confetti is out of the cannon. I mean, so, hey, the confetti is out of the cannon, and what are we going to do about it? So I'll toss it up for discussion here.
I mean, I'd probably say the alien is out of the spaceship is probably more of an accurate kind of analogy, because that feels like what we're dealing with. I mean, the specific issue of Hinton leaving Google, I think, is probably wrapped up in all sorts of different layers. You're talking about a kind of a British expatriate doctor, worked in the field for multiple decades, age 75, leaving one of the big Silicon Valley tech companies. He may have other reasons he doesn't want to work there anymore. And there are also opportunities, obviously from a freedom to speak his mind on the topic now that he's no longer there, which probably are playing into this. But that aside, you have to ask the broader question. I think what this points to is that, do we want people with good ethical mindsets and, kind of high levels of value for human life and kind of democracy and economy, etc., working inside of these organizations, or do you want them outside of those organizations and then no longer to influence? And that, I think, is the broader question, because there is a point here about the diversity of thought that needs to be inside of these companies, to both hold them to account, and then also the ability that those people do have when they are stepping outside of the payroll of those companies to be maybe a more forceful voice, and hopefully to join the initiatives that are in the industry that we're all familiar with, whether that's the work being done at a government level or by NGOs like the Open Voice Network and others who are trying to set standards in this arena. Self-disclosure that Bradley and I have both been very involved in those organizations. So I think that it's encouraging in many ways that someone like him has chosen to take a stand of at least kind of making his voice known. My concern is that we don't want there to be a mass exodus of those who are very thoughtful about the way that these things are going, leaving these organizations just because they're not necessarily commercially minded about the development of them. But more that we actually see more people stepping into these organizations and being that kind of thoughtful internal counsel, in the same way that we saw, in the wake of things like, Cambridge Analytica scandals and stuff like that, during the wake of all that happened during the elections and to do with social. Do you want people inside these organizations helping shape them, or do you want them outside being a voice but not having a controlling stake? And I think that is actually the broader worry here. The thoughts that he has shared are not dissimilar. The concerns that he has shared are not dissimilar to those that have signed the open letter that kind of hit the headlines a couple of weeks ago, or that you can even find Ilya and other members of the OpenAI team have also been very public about their own concerns, including Sam Altman on multiple podcasts in recent weeks about his own concerns of what they're creating and the potential issues it might create. But I think the bigger problem is, do we want people inside these companies holding them to account, or is it better to be outside and have a freer voice? And that's a more philosophical debate.
It's a whole lot of hand wringing. The subject matter is one thing. Maybe the guy, as Dan said, maybe the guy is ready for a change, or James, maybe you said it. He's ready for a change of scenery. Who knows? But the way that the media is presenting this information is very unhelpful. Everything from the picture, which is like this grayscale, like super dramatic picture of this man, to the framing of him as the AI godfather. How many people do we have to hear are the AI godfather? Is that the description of everybody? How many? Like, just tell me, give me a number. Like, it's clearly not one. So it's.
I think it's a badge you earn from putting the years in, right? It's like the Boy Scouts.
Clearly there's a series of boxes that were checked to earn that, and it's just the media dialing up the hysterics in a way that is very, very unproductive. And so, I'm sure he's a nice man. I'm sure he's super smart, and, but the media is doing what the media does. And that's where my mind goes, is I hate seeing this stuff. It's just, it doesn't help anybody.
I agree. I mean, I saw Cal Newport a couple of weeks ago on his podcast, very learned scholar in this space, the author of Deep Work and other books that I'm sure many will be familiar with. Has basically like deconstructed like what ChatGPT is and what ChatGPT is not. And it's like the whole conversation around sentience and whether or not this is a model to be worried about. So there are these kind of like opposing voices in the market. It's not all tech bros in kind of the valley that are saying this stuff is going to kill us. There is a more diverse debate to be had there. But like with all of these things, to Bradley's point, I think most media outlets would like this to be the next apocalyptic event that we should be concerned about. And maybe it will be. There are there are real reasons to be concerned, but the reporting on it is definitely kind of reaching a level of hysteria that I think probably is unhelpful.
It's interesting. I think we have to pay attention to him leaving. Like, it's something we have to pay attention to what he says next. Like, we have to pay attention. And the genie's out of the bottle, confetti's out of the cannon. I talked to my family and gave them all a code word. So in case they call me with some kind of emergency, I know it's them. So I think some of this stuff is going to be used for nefarious purposes. My dad's already gotten a fake call that I'm your grandson and whatever. the kid had a Texas accent. My son's from New Jersey, so they kind of missed. But that was people acting, not generating his voice, right? That's next, and it's easy, and it's not going to go away. So in my mind, it's technology is not good, and technology is not evil. Technology is technology. And there will probably be some amazing things that come out of this technology. Cures for cancer potential, like these kind of things that we're not imagining. And there will be people using it for bad purposes. So I'm all right. Let's adopt. All right, let's adapt. Hey, kids, here's your code word. If you call me, and now they're all laughing. They're calling me and saying the code word when they talk to me. So I know it's them. So I think there's just things you're going to have to do to get ready for this technology to be real.
Yeah, lots of really interesting insight there. Sorry, Bradley, I didn't know if you want to say something.
Well, no, yeah, I was just going to say, Tom, even in that scenario, you're adapting to the world you see. You're receiving information on what you think is a threat, and you are responding in real time to it, and preparing, the people you care about for it, which is the polar opposite of anybody asking for a pause. And as I think we all probably agree, that's not even on the table. That's just some theoretical nonsense that it makes, I guess, for some good discussion points. But, the quicker we get beyond that and start talking actionable stuff, just as you did with your own family, the better off all of us will be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a fascinating topic, actually. There's so many layers to it. I mean, strands from this conversation already. But I'm just going to switch topics as the Godfather of CX today, and maybe talk a little bit about this new private version of ChatGPT and what it could potentially bring to the enterprise. I don't know, Tom, maybe I'll start with you on this one. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so there's now kind of the part of me that's extremely excited about the technology. Having done this for so long, most of what we've built for enterprises using conversational technology is incredibly useful, but not necessarily amazing. And that's not because of speech technology and language technology. It's been, we've been able to understand what people are generally saying to enterprises for 20 years. It's the data about the person. It's the intelligence built in. All intelligence in these systems had to be built, had to be programmed in. And it's the unexciting, the unsexy part of the technologies that somebody's got to build all this. With large language models, if they can be built on an enterprise's data, if they can be private, suddenly you can have some phenomenal automations, some phenomenal conversations with technology that don't exist today. And I'm extremely excited about it. But as always with enterprise, you have to pass a security hurdle. And everyone always rises to it, but right now, and it's happening. People are using ChatGPT on their own. You see the articles about it. They're putting private information about a company because it's just so powerful. How do I say this? Let me ask ChatGPT. What would the people are asking it all the time? So the faster that we get this technology out, the more secure it is for everybody. But I'm still, that part of it, I'm extremely excited about. I feel like I've been waiting my career for a breakthrough like this so we can actually get intelligence in these systems without having to build it all.
Yeah. And using the technology to confine what the technology is capable of gets kind of, I personally think the market for resources that do redaction are going to be huge, so that you can use, what I call the big enough language models, the information that you glean from the conversations between companies and their customers, matched with product descriptions, commercial stuff that maybe you don't want it to go out into the wild, if you will. That should be used as sort of a smaller language model that is the corpus for the for conversations between people and machines, going forward. That gets really interesting, and that's where there's a lot of opportunity. But also, like you're saying, as we're saying here, take 4 steps back, be ethical, kind of understand, what should be shared. There is a technical side to it, and Adobe, of all companies, when they launched Firefly, revealed that, hey, we can do this with graphic information because we own a lot of the rights. We're not Hugging Face or whatever, and sort of blending all this public stuff that isn't tagged into the responses when you're doing generative AI. And we'll even set up a marketplace for people that own the rights to identify what can be incorporated in something, so that you have kind of a do not use for training tag that you can put on that information, Tom. Like when you are uploading stuff to train, to take advantage of the large language models to create your own answers, you should be able to say, this isn't for training the general stuff. And
Yeah,
we're
general
figuring
purposes.
that out.
I think the thing that this also raises, and this is something that we've been trying to kind of tackle with a number of clients recently at Vixen, is what about not just the subset kind of training models that you want to take? To your point, Dan, right? You want to maybe take one of these big models and make it smaller in some respects, or at least kind of overlay your own data on it. I think the point that this also points to is that I think you're going to find a lot of companies beginning to take action on wanting the models to be untrained from the data that may not have ever been licensed to them. And we've already seen the case between Twitter and Microsoft, and Elon threatening to kind of sue, kind of Microsoft about the Twitter data apparently not being open source. And like, well, who owns my tweets is a great philosophical debate again that we could kind of go down. But I think the broader point here about having a either an on-prem or a kind of enterprise secure enclave version of these models is going to be one of the big things that we're going to see all of the large language models, but whether they are generative for text or generative for images or video, coming down the line. Because broadly speaking, most of the models already are trained on about as many tokens of text that we can already get out there in the world, right? We're running out of tokens to basically train them on. But the next frontiers, to your point about Adobe, are going to be the image and video models, right? These models have not yet ingested all of the video that's on YouTube. They've not yet ingested all of the podcast audio that's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. But when they do, which inevitably will be the direction of travel, right? If we want these things to get ever better, you've got to start giving them massive corpuses of audio visual technology. And of course, as more and more of our discourse inside of enterprises moves from being emails and Slacks, but to video calls and recorded meetings and audio notes and other things, you've got to think about this is not just that companies will want to have private versions of ChatGPT so they can upload their own text data, but so that they can actually have these more multimodal assistants running inside of these experiences. At the moment, the vision that Microsoft has painted for us with Copilot is that like it's just going to be a given that we'll all be happy for this thing to be running in the background of our Teams calls. And I think that they're going to start hitting real hurdles with lots of their big enterprise customers, that they will just not be happy about the idea that all of those video calls are going to be auto-transcribed, uploaded. And so that's why this orchestration around the secure environments has got to happen first with ChatGPT, because it's the one that's the most newsworthy. But ultimately, all of these enterprise systems are going to have that kind of end-to-end encryption, whether that's encrypting the prompt, encrypting the reply, possibly on cloud encryption to make sure that the data that's up there in the first place can never be seen. Like, these are some of the kind of big hurdles that the enterprise solutions are going to need to get over. In the consumer domain, we maybe are happy. I've always said this, Bradley said me say this on stage at Project Voice, like the history of the internet is giving up privacy for utility. We're used to that as individuals, but as companies, I just don't think we're willing to do that transaction in the same way. And certainly not when so many of these use cases coalesce around one of 3 or 4 big companies. That the risk just seems to be magnified greatly in that respect.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, I mean, that's my thoughts entirely. Is the technology is one thing, and it's important for it to continue to advance. But let's not forget that just about 5 or 6 years ago, we got a crash course in the complex relationship between a mainstream darling technology and corporate boardroom defensibility in the media. Amazon Alexa was all over the place. It was all anybody wanted to talk about. It appeared like it had wide blue ocean to go anywhere it darn well pleased, including into corporate boardrooms, including into, revising how the office worked, and all of these sorts of things. And then what happened? Well, we got a bunch of articles about, oh, well, it took the stuff out of this bedroom in one house and put it into another one. Oh, and the FBI used it to solve a murder in Mississippi. Oh, and this, and this, and this, and this. And all of a sudden, the tone changed. And it's going to be interesting to see how that happens. I feel like we're watching almost the same story play out here. And, it's interesting just to note that Microsoft, you look at the brand, clean, unoffensive, well pruned, similar to how, I would argue Google used to be. And now Google is as conflicted of a brand as you can find. All it takes is one wrong story to start a cavalcade of stuff that changes everything. So I don't know. It's interesting to sit back and watch. And the fun part for all of us is just all the energy and resources and time and money and investment going into across the board, all this stuff, making it, as good as it can be.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah,
fascinating.
but Bradley, I mean,
sorry, Dan, go on.
Bradley, let's take the sensationalist nature of press coverage for granted, and just sort of say, what sells papers. I guess there aren't papers anymore, but what clickbait is clickbait for a reason, and because people sort of gravitate towards the lurid, and worst case, it maybe kills off some initiatives like Alexa not making it in corporate America. Except that wasn't the isolated reason for that. I mean, a lot of it just has to do with the architecture of how you capture what somebody said and where it resides and who has access to it, and that it may get exaggerated into, hey, here's instances where we know they say they're not listening, but they are, and blah 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 blah. But same thing, a similar as you're sort of alluding to is a similar issue with ChatGPT in the enterprise, and I think Tom can speak to that. We get a lot of questions from companies saying, "Hey, why wouldn't I have ChatGPT answer the phone?" And aside from the fact that it fibs a lot and you're not necessarily going to have answers, there's just a lot of issues with there's just a lot of conditions that enterprises are going to attach. You talk to the legal department and say, hey, if somebody's calling and asking to fill out, essentially these things could be good at filling out forms. So somebody could call and talk to a bot and say, I'm applying for a mortgage, and then they get turned down for the mortgage. And they say why, and you learn that there's layers of the neural network that made the decision that are not transparent. So you can't explain it. And the legal department's going to say you're nuts to unleash this unbridled in the talk path between and among employees and with customers. So I'll stop there. But
no, it's important. I think it's important who launches it. Like I partner with Salesforce a lot, and they're launching Einstein GPT, and they're in the enterprise. Like everybody owns Salesforce in their enterprise, right? So they've figured out security, and companies work with them. So I think having this technology as a supplement to the people are already using it as a supplement. So making it so that they can use it within their world. So you're in the contact center and you're already in Salesforce, and then you have it right there with you securely to be able to have that conversation and give better answers back. I think we're going to see that literally within months, that we're going to be seeing that being used. And that's what's exciting for me. Most of this technology, there's so much build to get it to be effective. And this is really taking a lot of that build away. But Dan, we're not putting it in front of people directly with the end, because it hallucinates too much. Like you don't want to get some random answer out when somebody's calling in. So, but I think helping the people that are professionals, I think we're going to see that very soon.
Yeah. And Salesforce did that as a demo for, Einstein, for the contact center, just sort of, they showed how, when an agent finishes a call, it'll say, hey, do you want, and I guess Copilot, if we give Microsoft some credit here, they'll say, okay, do you want to do a follow-up email to the call you just had and compose it, and it puts the agent in the role of editor. And then the question is, how involved they get in editing or just hitting send. So,
Yeah, it's a fascinating conversation. And I think there's so many great insights within that, touching so many areas. I mean, if we go back to now, they're running out of data to train a lot of these systems on. So they're taking it. So I liked your Adobe example, Dan, of taking it from the graphic. And then also, I really loved James and Bradley, your conversation on Alexa as well. And just maybe to close off, I know there was a recent news story around Alexa, and maybe how AWS will use LLMs will use data to train their LLMs. Wow, I'm struggling with that word. I know Bradley and James, you wanted to both speak to that, but I don't know, Bradley, maybe I'll quickly come to you on this first.
Yeah. So, this morning, as of this recording, there's an article the Business Insider ran about with a headline saying that Amazon is going to be incorporating ChatGPT-like features into Alexa. And not that that's a surprise to anybody. I don't think I would call that news either. I don't know what I would call it. But the article was noteworthy for an entirely unintended reason, which is the way that it slanders Amazon and just and Alexa as a property. How quickly we forget what we've gone through the last 6 or 7 years to reach the point where ChatGPT can captivate us in this way. Alexa and everything that Amazon did, and I have no financial stake in Amazon whatsoever. I've never worked for them. I owe them nothing. I just give credit where credit's due. They're a fantastic group of people that's worked on this, and a highly innovative crew. And it's painful to watch the narrative getting rewritten like, oh, Alexa's yesterday's trash, and it's all about ChatGPT now. No, the book is yet to be written on the synthesis and the convergence of all of this stuff. And so, that was the only point I wanted to bring up is, the giants of yesterday are still looming. You just don't see them, but they're still there. And there's more chapters yet to come.
Yeah, I mean, I can say, and I'll put my own disclosures in here, that Amazon both are a client of ours and a partner. So I'll kind of say that up front, and we do a lot of work both with their teams to help build things for third parties and also directly for the platform. But up until now, whilst the system is obviously very much based upon great NLU and NLP technology, right? The ability to listen to us and understand that, it should never be taken for granted of how complex a thing that is going on there, and how advanced that they have made that over time. But still, up until now, even in the most recent versions of the base system, a lot of what you get from Alexa when you speak to her or it or whoever, I've already had a debate with the Alexa Alliance team today of campaigning for that name to be changed on LinkedIn. However you speak to her, the majority of what you get back is written. It is written by a human. Correct. And it's part of the personalities team. We had the privilege of working with the division just before Christmas, launching some themes, which are kind of a new Alexa visual voice experience you can get. We launched one for Avatar Way of the Water. When you get that stuff coming back, it's script. It's been written by someone. It's been written by a human. But I think the ability for these LLM models to kind of sit underneath this broader kind of system of the assistant is actually less about that suddenly Alexa's going to be like chatting to you all afternoon and have lots to say, but it's actually much more about the large language model input and the ability for it to have a much better understanding of what your intent was. And that's what we're going to see. That's how to answer the vision that Andy Jassy, who the current CEO, pointed out in the earnings call this week. Their vision is to make it the world's best personal assistant. And if you want a great personal assistant, it doesn't have to be great at writing an email. It has to be really good at understanding what you wanted. And that's the difference when you begin to add these types of technologies behind the power of something that is already as powerful as Alexa, and to that point about Google Assistant and Siri and all of the others. That what we're seeing is that this is kind of like just a big leapfrog forward in terms of the capabilities of these systems, because their ability to understand context, understand intent, and do something with that information. The response you get back, you do not want that being generated by a large language model, hoping every single time that the one-shot reply that you get back was the correct thing, and it read it out to you potentially for several minutes out loud in your living room. That is not a great experience. None of us want that. What we do want, though, is that when we say, hey, I'm not going to say the trigger word, but hey, I'm going out this afternoon. Could you put this on my calendar? Could you maybe pre-order several things for the party that we're doing this weekend? Oh, and also, can you check what time the kids are going to be home? That you don't have to do that in multiple steps. That the language model running underneath it could understand and interpret all of that text and do something with that. So that's what we should, I think, expect of this type of development. It's not that we're suddenly going to have these long form back and forth conversations with a voice bot. Maybe some of us will, but the majority of us, I think, are going to be experiencing that we'll get so much more done with these assistants once they begin to be powered by these types of solutions, in a way that we saw with Google Duplex a couple of years ago when that was first demoed at I/O, and the promise of being able to book, restaurant reservations.
Whoa.
That just now is potentially possible. It wasn't before, really, but now it might potentially be possible, and that's what I think Amazon are trying to do here. And final point, I just end on this, is that we often throw shade, I think, at these companies when they're not the first to market. And if Apple has taught us anything over its history, is that being first is not always about being best. And I think that that's something that we should always take into consideration. From our own research, from the Voice Consumer Index, which we publish every year, we know 50% of people have one of these devices in their homes and they use it multiple times a week, if not multiple times a day, right? That's hundreds of millions of devices that, regardless of what's going on with ChatGPT right now, there are way more people talking to these devices in their living rooms and kitchens and bathrooms every single day than there are plugging stuff into ChatGPT. And if you're a business thinking about where the opportunity is in this space, absolutely, we should be paying attention to this next layer of chatbots and where they're going to go. But this is not to be ignored, and it's only moments away from having radically better capabilities. So ignore it at your peril, I think, is probably what our suggestion would be.
Which might bring us full circle here to what Geoffrey Hinton was thinking when he left Google, which is, there's a lot of, as Bradley put it, the integration and intermingling of these technologies that we have to iron out. And we should, and as we're trying to bring up here, the potential is huge on the ethical, highly useful side. We can relegate, you can basically assume that every new technology has nefarious outcomes that can happen. But if we sort of pay attention to the good part, the stuff that's truly useful to, for legitimate uses, we don't want to stop that progress. And when the luminaries move out and say, hey, take a close look at what's going on, take them seriously, figure out how these things can talk to one another without violating privacy, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'll stop there.
No, I think that's a really good point maybe to end on as we've come full circle. But this has been a really terrific conversation. So yeah, thank you all very much for joining me today. As I said, I learned a lot, and I think there's lots of food for thought. I'd love, of course, to go into lots of the other stories touching the space. I think Samsung stopping its employees from using ChatGPT is one of them, but maybe that's for another day now, because lots of great conversation was had. So thanks to all our analysts and experts for joining me, and thank you all for watching too. Bye for now.
Thanks.